What if the real reason your partner isn't fully satisfied isn't because she's not capable of pleasure, but because you've never been taught to see her pleasure in all its forms? What if what you've been calling the orgasm is only a fraction of what her body and soul can experience? Most men grow up believing there's just one kind of female climax. A quick physical release, something that happens to her if he gets everything right. But women's pleasure isn't mechanical. It's energetic, emotional, and deeply layered. And the truth is, there are at least 6 different kinds of orgasms, each one connected not only to her body, but to her heart and her sense of safety. Let's be honest, when most men think about sex, they think about performance. They think about stamina, angles, rhythm, making her moan, making it last. They measure success by reaction, not connection, but real intimacy, the kind that leaves you both trembling, silent, in awe, doesn't come from what you do to her body. It comes from what you awaken in her being. Understanding female pleasure isn't just about becoming a better lover. It's about becoming a more emotionally intelligent, connected, and conscious human being. When a man begins to understand female pleasure, something shifts inside him. He starts to realize that pleasure isn't a transaction. It's communication. It's the body's language of trust. When a woman's body opens, it's not because you've mastered a technique. It's because she feels safe enough to surrender. Pleasure for her is not only about stimulation, but about emotional release. A moment when she can finally let go of control, expectations, and the noise in her head. Think about it. A woman's body doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to permission. The permission to feel, to relax, to not have to perform. Most men don't realize how many women have learned to fake pleasure not out of deceit, but out of exhaustion, out of wanting to protect a man's ego or to simply end the pressure. And so many men have been told that if they do it right, if they learn the perfect moves, they can make her orgasm. But pleasure isn't something you make happen. It's something you allow to unfold. True understanding starts when a man stops trying to control the outcome and starts tuning into her experience. Every sigh, every breath, every shift of her body. They're not cues for performance. They're invitations to slow down and listen. Because when she feels seen, not judged, when she feels held, not hurried, her body responds with honesty. And that honesty is the beginning of real intimacy. A woman's pleasure is a mirror. It reflects how present you are. It reflects whether she feels emotionally safe, whether she trusts you enough to let her guard down. That's why so many relationships lose their spark, not because attraction fades, but because emotional safety erodes. You can't touch her deeply if you can't feel her deeply. You can't reach her body if you've forgotten how to reach her heart. In many ways, understanding female pleasure is the ultimate test of a man's maturity. It asks him to confront his own insecurities, his fear of not being enough, his need for validation, his impatience with vulnerability. It requires him to become aware, to move beyond ego and step into empathy, to ask not, am I pleasing her, but am I with her? Because when you're truly with her, not just physically but emotionally, something changes. Her body starts to trust you. Her nervous system relaxes. Her breathing synchronizes with yours. The room fills with something unspoken but unmistakable. That's intimacy. That's connection. That's what real sex was meant to be. Not 2 people chasing climax, but 2 souls exploring presence. And when you start to understand her pleasure, you begin to realize how misunderstood it's been for centuries. Culture has reduced it to anatomy, to friction, to finding the right spot. But female pleasure is not mechanical. It's emotional intelligence embodied. It's the result of chemistry between her mind, her heart, and her body. If one is disconnected, pleasure can't flow freely. If she feels unseen, unheard, or unsafe, her body literally shuts down. Her arousal system is wired to emotional context. And that's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's her biology protecting her integrity. When you begin to understand this, you stop trying to get her there and start asking what makes her feel alive. You become curious. You ask questions, not for information, but for connection. What feels good right now? Do you want me to slow down? What helps you feel most relaxed? These are not the words of a weak man. They're the words of a conscious one. Because the strongest kind of masculinity isn't the one that dominates. It's the one that listens. When you understand her pleasure, You stop equating dominance with power and start realizing that your greatest power is gentleness. You begin to see that the woman in front of you isn't an object to conquer but a mystery to explore. And every time you choose to be patient instead of rushing, to be curious instead of assuming, you build something far more valuable than arousal. You build trust. And trust is the true doorway to desire. The irony is that when a woman feels emotionally connected, when she feels safe and adored, her pleasure actually expands. Neuroscience shows that a woman's brain can't fully process arousal if she's stressed or disconnected. But when she feels cherished, her brain releases oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins that amplify sensation and deepen pleasure. Her body literally opens to you. And that's when the physical and emotional merge. When sex becomes more than sex. Imagine for a moment that every touch, every breath, every look you share is an act of communication. Imagine that instead of focusing on technique, you focus on tuning in, feeling her body, reading her energy, sensing when she's holding back or when she's ready to let go. This is what mastery looks like. Not control, attunement. Not performance, presence. When a man understands a woman's pleasure, he stops being afraid of her emotions. He no longer sees her tears, her moans, or her silences as mysteries to decode, but as expressions of life. He realizes that pleasure isn't just about stimulation. It's about awakening parts of her that have been silenced by judgment or fear. When she feels seen in her pleasure, she feels seen in her humanity, and that changes everything. The truth is, understanding her pleasure also heals him, because when he stops performing and starts connecting, he allows himself to feel too. Most men have been trained to disconnect from their emotions, to suppress vulnerability, to equate strength with stoicism. But when he witnesses her authenticity, her unguarded, unfiltered expression of joy, something inside him starts to soften. He remembers what it means to be open, to feel, to be alive. In that moment, intimacy becomes mutual awakening. Her pleasure becomes a mirror for his own capacity to love. And suddenly, sex stops being a goal and becomes a meditation, a shared experience of presence, breath, and gratitude. You see, real intimacy doesn't come from knowing what to do. It comes from knowing how to be. You can't fake that. You can't learn it from a video or a list of top 10 moves. You learn it through awareness, through paying attention to her, to yourself, to the energy between you. Through silence, through patience, through willingness to slow down and let her body lead. When a man finally understands this, he stops seeing pleasure as something to give or take and starts seeing it as something to create together. And in that shared creation, both people are transformed. He becomes more compassionate, she becomes more open. He learns that love is not measured in reactions, but in resonance. Because at the end of the day, the real goal isn't to make her orgasm. It's to make her feel safe enough to be fully herself. When she feels that, her pleasure is effortless. Her body responds naturally. The orgasm becomes not the goal, but the byproduct of deep connection. And that kind of pleasure, the kind that flows from trust and emotional alignment, is far more powerful than any technique could ever deliver. So understanding female pleasure isn't just about sex. It's about understanding love. It's about relearning what it means to connect. It's about unlearning the conditioning that says your worth as a man comes from how much you can do, and realizing that your true power lies in how deeply you can be. When you hold her and she feels your stillness, when she looks in your eyes and sees presence instead of pressure, that's when her body begins to melt. That's when she stops protecting herself and starts trusting the moment. And in that space, that rare sacred space, both of you are changed. She becomes radiant, expressive, open. You become grounded, tender, strong. Together, you create something beyond pleasure. You create connection. Because ultimately, understanding female pleasure is not about technique. It's about reverence. It's about seeing her not as something to figure out, but as something to feel. It's about honoring the truth that pleasure is sacred, a language of love, not performance. When you approach it that way, every touch becomes meaningful, every breath becomes poetry, and every moment becomes an opportunity to rediscover what intimacy was always meant to be. Not an act, but an awakening. If you want to truly understand a woman's pleasure, You have to move beyond anatomy and enter awareness, emotional, mental, and physical awareness. Because her orgasms are not isolated events that happen in her body. They are the language through which her mind, heart, and soul communicate with you. When you understand this, you stop chasing results and start cultivating connection. The 6 types of female orgasms aren't just physiological experiences, they're emotional states. Each one opens a different door into her being, and each one teaches you something about presence, patience, and love. The first, the clitoral orgasm, is the most familiar. It's physical, sensitive, quick to awaken, and yet it's also misunderstood. Many men treat it like a switch. Press here, get results. But the clitoris isn't just a button. It's an instrument of emotion. It responds to energy, to tone, to rhythm. It's like music. Too much pressure and you lose the melody. Too little and there's no resonance. To unlock it, you don't need speed. You need connection. It's not about what your hands or tongue do. It's about whether she feels your focus. A clitoral orgasm isn't only the result of touch. It's the result of feeling adored. When she senses that your attention is anchored in her pleasure, her body relaxes. The clitoris awakens not under pressure, but under presence. The emotion here is trust, the sense that she can let go and be fully received. The second, the G-spot orgasm, is deeper, both physically and emotionally. The G-spot holds emotion, memory, and energy. It's often described as the seat of release, the place where pleasure and vulnerability meet. This orgasm doesn't come from friction. It comes from rhythm and surrender. It's often slow to build because it's not just about stimulation. It's about allowing emotion to surface. Some women cry when they experience it, not because of pain or sadness, but because something stored is being released. The G-spot orgasm teaches that pleasure and healing are intertwined. When a man is patient, when he creates space without rushing, her body feels safe enough to let go. The awareness required here is emotional. It's tuning into her subtle cues, recognizing when she's in her head and when she's in her body. It's not about asking, "Are you close?" but feeling when she's opening. Then comes the cervical orgasm, the most profound, the most misunderstood, and the most spiritual. The cervix is a gateway between her physical and energetic body. It can't open under tension. It opens under complete surrender. To reach this level of pleasure, she must feel emotionally naked. There's no way to fake this. Her body won't allow it if she feels pressured, judged, or unseen. That's why this kind of orgasm often happens in deep, loving relationships, not casual encounters. It requires safety at a cellular level. For a man, this means learning to slow down, to be still, to breathe with her. It means eye contact, heart connection, emotional attunement. The awareness here is spiritual presence, the ability to hold stillness so powerful that her body trusts the depth of your calm. When the cervical orgasm happens, it feels cosmic. Waves of energy, trembling, sometimes tears or laughter. It's not about climax, it's about transcendence. It's when her body and soul say, "I trust you completely." The fourth is the blended orgasm, a symphony where different pleasure centers awaken together. It's when clitoral, G-spot, or cervical stimulation combine, creating a cascade of sensations that move through her entire body. This kind of orgasm can't be controlled. It must be allowed. It happens when both partners are emotionally synchronized. Her breathing, your rhythm, her energy, your awareness, all become one flow. To unlock it, you must be attuned not just to what you're doing, but how she's feeling. You'll sense it in her body language. The arch of her back, the stillness of her breath, the vibration of energy under her skin. It's as if time slows. You're not trying to reach something anymore. You're simply following what's unfolding. The awareness required here is energetic. It's about listening with your whole being, not just your hands. When you're both present, the orgasm isn't localized. It expands. You feel it too. The room fills with something sacred. The fifth, the full-body orgasm, is unlike anything most people experience. It's not limited to genitals. It's energy moving through her entire nervous system. It can happen through touch, breath, or even emotional connection alone. When she's deeply attuned, her body becomes hypersensitive to every sensation. Pleasure ripples from her fingertips to her spine, from her chest to her toes. It feels like being flooded with warmth, electricity, light. But this isn't achieved through technique. It's cultivated through awareness. For her to experience a full-body orgasm, she must be relaxed, grounded, and emotionally free. That only happens when she feels no performance anxiety, no pressure to please, no fear of judgment. Your job, as her partner, is to create that environment. Through slow breathing, gentle touch, and absolute acceptance, you become a container for her expansion. The emotion here is freedom, the experience of pleasure without fear. The mental awareness is mindfulness, the ability to be completely in the moment. And finally, the soul orgasm, the rarest, most profound form of all. This one doesn't just happen through touch, but through connection. It occurs when emotional intimacy, physical presence, and spiritual energy merge completely. It's when she feels utterly known, completely seen, and deeply loved. Her body becomes an instrument of divine energy, and so does yours. This orgasm is not about climax. It's about union. It's the moment when two people stop being separate and start vibrating as one. There's no need for movement, no need for words, just presence. The awareness here is heart consciousness, the recognition that pleasure is not just physical but sacred. When you both reach that space, time disappears. It's not passion anymore, it's devotion. Each of these orgasms requires something different from you, a different form of awareness, a different level of attunement. The clitoral asks for focus, the G-spot for patience, the cervical for trust, the blended for synchronization, the full body for freedom, and the soul for love. Together, they map the journey from physical pleasure to spiritual awakening. But here's what most men miss. You can't force your way through this map. You can't decide to give her a cervical orgasm or a full body one. You can only create the space for them to emerge. That space is built from presence, the ability to slow down, listen, breathe, and feel. If you rush, her body will close. If you judge, her energy will retreat. If you push, her mind will tense. But if you stay, breathe, and soften, she will open. When you understand this, you realize that each orgasm is a reflection of her internal world and your ability to meet it. The clitoral orgasm says, "I trust your touch." The G-spot says, "I trust your patience." The cervical says, "I trust your presence." The blended says, "We're in sync." The full body says, "I'm free." And the soul says, "I love you." You can't separate these experiences from emotion, because the female body is emotion made physical. Her arousal begins not in her body, but in her mind, in how she feels about herself, about you, about the space between you. When you approach her with love, curiosity, and acceptance, her body interprets that as safety. Safety leads to openness. Openness leads to sensitivity. Sensitivity leads to pleasure. It's a chain reaction that begins long before the bedroom. That's why the best lovers don't just touch a woman's body. They touch her heart through their energy. They understand that the most powerful arousal is not in what you do, but in how you make her feel. When she feels cherished, her body wants to open. When she feels adored without expectation, her energy expands. And when she feels you truly see her, not the image, not the performance, but the truth of her, she begins to experience pleasure on levels she didn't even know existed. So, if you want to master these 6 orgasms, don't start with your hands or your techniques. Start with your awareness. Start with how you breathe, how you look at her, how you hold space when she's silent. Learn to listen beyond words. Notice the subtleties, her breath quickening, her muscles relaxing, her heartbeat changing rhythm under your hand. These are the signs her body gives when it feels safe. Follow them, don't lead them. True mastery doesn't mean control. It means surrender. It means realizing that her pleasure is not a prize for your performance, but a reflection of your presence. Every woman's body has its own rhythm, its own intelligence, its own timing. Your job is to be patient enough to hear it. And when you do, when you begin to connect on that level, something extraordinary happens. Sex stops being something you do and becomes something you experience together. Every kiss becomes deeper. Every touch becomes meaningful. Every breath becomes shared energy. You begin to feel her pleasure inside you, and she feels your devotion inside her. That's what the ancient traditions meant when they said that true intimacy is divine, because it takes you both beyond the body and into the soul. The 6 orgasms are not just destinations, they're lessons. The clitoral teaches focus. The G-spot teaches vulnerability. The cervical teaches surrender. The blended teaches harmony. The full body teaches presence. And the soul teaches love. Together, they form a spiritual curriculum for connection. And when you master that, not through technique, but through awareness, you don't just become a great lover. You become awakened. Because in the end, the greatest orgasm isn't hers or yours. It's the shared awakening that happens when two people finally see, feel, and honor each other completely. That's the real climax. Not a moment of release, but a lifetime of understanding. Everything we've been discussing, the 6 orgasms, emotional awareness, presence, comes down to one central truth: trust. Safety and presence are the foundation of connection. Without them, pleasure is limited, intimacy is shallow, and desire fades. A woman cannot fully open her body without first knowing that she can open her heart. She cannot surrender to sensation without feeling emotionally secure. And she cannot reach her deepest levels of pleasure if she senses even the slightest pressure, judgment, or distraction. Trust is the invisible thread that binds sexual energy to emotional connection. It's not built in a night, nor through physical skill alone. Trust is cultivated over time, through consistent behavior, patience, and empathy. Every time you listen without interrupting, every time you honor her boundaries, every time you respond to her vulnerability without judgment, you are building trust. And when trust is present, her nervous system relaxes, allowing her body to respond naturally. The clitoris opens more readily. The G-spot deepens. The cervical sensitivity awakens, and the energy can flow freely throughout her being. Trust transforms pleasure from a mechanical act into a profound experience. Safety is the second pillar. Safety is more than a promise of physical security. It's emotional and psychological. A woman must feel that her desires, fears, and fantasies are welcomed rather than ridiculed. She must know that expressing herself, through words, moans, gestures, or silence, will never invite shame or rejection. Emotional safety allows the mind to release tension, the body to relax, and the nervous system to switch from fight or flight into rest and receptivity. Without safety, pleasure becomes inhibited, or worse, performative. The most exquisite orgasm can be rendered hollow if she feels unsafe in any part of her experience. Presence is the third pillar, and it is perhaps the most overlooked. Men often mistake attention for presence. Presence is not looking at her body, watching her reaction, or timing the moment to climax. Presence is being with her completely, body, mind, and spirit. It is holding your attention in the now, observing her micro-expressions, feeling her energy, breathing in sync, and listening beyond words. Presence is the ability to witness without interference, to honor her pace, to mirror her subtle rhythms. In presence, touch becomes language, and connection becomes tangible. A hand on her back, a gaze into her eyes, a slow breath aligned with hers. These are not small gestures. They are the scaffolding of deep intimacy. When trust, safety, and presence align, something remarkable happens. Her body feels permission to experience fully. The clitoral orgasm is no longer a reflex. It becomes a communication of mutual awareness. The G-spot orgasm is no longer just a physical reaction. It becomes a release of stored tension, a liberation of energy. The cervical orgasm transforms into a spiritual dialogue between partners, a sacred acknowledgement of vulnerability and surrender. The blended full body and soul orgasms unfold naturally as the energy moves freely and effortlessly between you. Men who understand this stop viewing sex as a performance. They stop calculating the right moves or measuring success by the number of climaxes. Instead, they become conduits for shared energy. They recognize that their job is not to create pleasure for her, but to support the conditions under which it naturally arises. They understand that a woman's body and mind are deeply interconnected, and that emotional and physical pleasure are inseparable. Every moment of touch, every whisper, every pause, every breath contributes to this alchemy. If she feels rushed, presence is lost. If she feels criticized, safety collapses. If she feels unseen, trust is broken. But if she feels held, honored, and fully witnessed, intimacy deepens in ways words cannot capture. She begins to associate not only her pleasure, but her entire emotional being with the connection she feels in your presence. Trust, safety, and presence also cultivate desire in ways that technique alone cannot. Desire is not generated solely by physical stimulation. It is created when she knows she can be vulnerable and still be loved, when she feels free to express herself fully, when she experiences a man's unwavering attention and attunement. The brain interprets these cues as safety, allowing dopamine and oxytocin to flow, opening the body to arousal. This is why emotionally safe, present men are often irresistible. They create the conditions for deep, expansive pleasure, and women respond naturally to that energy. Presence, in particular, acts as a bridge between sexual and emotional intimacy. A man who is fully present doesn't just touch her body, he touches her consciousness. He aligns his breathing, mirrors her energy, and listens with full attention. He doesn't anticipate the outcome, he participates in the unfolding moment. This level of attentiveness amplifies pleasure and allows her to experience sensations in a multidimensional way, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Safety amplifies this process. Emotional safety allows experimentation, exploration, and authenticity. Women can express desires they may have hidden, they can guide without fear of rejection, and they can surrender fully without hesitation. The body responds to this safety with heightened sensitivity, the nervous system becomes more receptive, and pleasure deepens. Safety transforms the bedroom into a sanctuary, a space where both partners can explore the full spectrum of sensation and intimacy without distraction or doubt. Trust is the glue that holds this system together. Trust is earned through consistent respect, responsiveness, and emotional intelligence. Each act of consideration, listening without judgment, honoring limits, showing patience, expressing authentic care, reinforces trust. When trust is present, it permeates the interaction, creating a fertile ground for every type of orgasm. When trust is broken, even perfect technique cannot recreate the same depth of connection. The combination of trust, safety, and presence transforms sexual interaction into an experience of true intimacy. It allows the woman to access all 6 orgasms: clitoral, G-spot, cervical, blended, full body, and soul, in a way that feels natural, effortless, and deeply satisfying. It allows the man to connect with her energy on a level far beyond the physical, experiencing her pleasure as a shared, reciprocal phenomenon rather than a one-sided event. This principle also extends beyond the bedroom. Trust, safety, and presence cultivate emotional intimacy, strengthen relational bonds, and build a foundation for long-lasting desire. A woman who feels safe, seen, and fully engaged with will bring that same openness into all aspects of the relationship. She will share her thoughts, her dreams, her fears, her joy. And the man who practices presence, honors her boundaries, and consistently reinforces trust will experience the reciprocity of connection, a cycle of intimacy that deepens over time. The lessons are clear. Physical technique is secondary. True mastery comes from creating the conditions for her body and mind to fully open. Presence anchors the experience. Safety allows vulnerability. Trust sustains continuity. When these elements are in alignment, the interaction transcends the physical act and becomes something profound, a dance of energy, emotion, and shared consciousness. Men who understand this see pleasure not as a destination, but as a journey in which the emotional, mental, and physical are inseparable. They realize that every act of touch, gaze, and breath is an opportunity to build intimacy, deepen desire, and create sacred space. They understand that orgasm is not the goal. Connection is the goal. Orgasm is a natural byproduct of that connection, not its measure. By prioritizing trust, safety, and presence, men can move beyond superficial sexual encounters into transformative experiences that awaken both partners. They create intimacy that lingers long after the act ends, that resonates in memory, energy, and emotional alignment. They understand that pleasure is not merely about stimulation. It is about resonance, co-creation, and the interplay of energy and attention. When a man can hold space for a woman, fully present, fully attentive, emotionally safe, and trusted, he unlocks access to all 6 types of female orgasms in their fullest expressions. He becomes a partner in her pleasure, a guide in her emotional journey, and a witness to her deepest self. And in return, he discovers a depth of intimacy satisfaction, and connection that no technique alone could ever provide. Trust, safety, and presence are not optional. They are the foundation of everything. Without them, sex remains mechanical, pleasure remains limited, and connection remains shallow. With them, the body opens, the heart opens, and desire flourishes naturally. Beyond the climax, beyond the act, these are the elements that transform sexual experiences into intimacy, and intimacy into a shared, life-altering journey of connection. If we peel back the layers of what makes sexual connection magnetic, what you'll find is not mastery of technique, not a repertoire of moves, but emotional intelligence and attunement. Chemistry, the kind that makes a woman's body respond before her mind even understands it, is created in the space where emotional intelligence meets presence. Technique can stimulate, but it cannot create resonance. Technique can generate reactions, but it cannot generate trust, vulnerability, or deep longing. Emotional intelligence is the gateway to that deeper chemistry, and attunement is the language through which it speaks. Emotional intelligence, in the context of intimacy, is the ability to perceive, understand, and respond to a partner's emotional state. It's about noticing subtle shifts in energy, reading micro-expressions, and sensing when she's relaxed, anxious, excited, or holding back. It's about understanding the signals her body and mind are giving, even before she verbalizes them. A man with emotional intelligence doesn't just touch her body. He senses her inner state and adjusts accordingly. He recognizes that an arch of her back, a pause in her breath, or a tightening of her shoulders is not a cue to push harder, but a cue to tune in more deeply. Attunement is the skill that transforms this awareness into real-time connection. It's the ability to synchronize with her energy, rhythm, and emotional state. When a man is attuned, he mirrors her breathing, matches her pace, and responds to her subtle signals with sensitivity and care. Attunement is why some lovers can ignite chemistry instantly, while others rely solely on physical technique. Technique can excite the body, but attunement excites the whole person. It bridges the gap between physical sensation and emotional resonance. Consider a woman experiencing a clitoral orgasm. Technique might allow stimulation, but emotional intelligence allows a man to know when to pause, when to increase intensity, when to adjust pressure, and when to simply hold space. His attunement creates rhythm that feels alive, intuitive, almost telepathic. She doesn't just feel physical pleasure. She feels understood, seen, and mirrored. The pleasure becomes amplified because it's emotionally anchored. Her body responds more fully, not just because of touch, but because of the connection that accompanies it. Or think about the G-spot orgasm. It often requires patience, gentleness, and deep emotional resonance. A man can apply mechanical pressure, but without emotional intelligence, she may remain closed or guarded. With attunement, he senses when she's ready to open, when tension is melting, when subtle cues indicate that she's moving toward release. He adjusts in real time, following her body's signals rather than imposing his plan. In this space, pleasure becomes a collaborative journey, a dance of give and receive, not a race to climax. The cervical orgasm is perhaps the ultimate test of emotional intelligence. It demands presence, patience, and trust. A woman cannot experience it if she senses judgment or pressure. Emotional intelligence allows a man to read her comfort level, understand her boundaries, and respond with care that reinforces her sense of safety. Attunement allows him to move in harmony with her energy, breathing in sync, adjusting rhythm, and holding space. In this way, chemistry isn't manufactured. It emerges naturally from the emotional resonance they share. Even blended and full-body orgasms rely on this dynamic. These experiences are less about stimulation and more about synchronization. When a man is emotionally intelligent and attuned, he can match the energy surges in her body, mirror the flow of arousal, and amplify it. Every sigh, shiver, and movement becomes a signal to deepen connection. He is no longer acting on a checklist of techniques. He is responding to a living, breathing map of energy and emotion. Chemistry arises spontaneously from this alignment. Emotional intelligence also shapes the mental landscape of desire. Women are highly responsive to cues that indicate a partner understands, respects, and values them. Small gestures, noticing her mood, adjusting to her comfort, checking in with a question or a touch, convey empathy and awareness. These gestures create a sense of being truly known, which heightens arousal and amplifies responsiveness. The mind becomes part of the experience, not a barrier. Pleasure is no longer a mechanical reaction. It is a holistic response to connection, presence, and recognition. Attunement in practice is a form of nonverbal communication that technique cannot replicate. It requires listening with more than your ears. Listening with your eyes, your breath, your energy. It's noticing when her body stiffens, when her energy spikes, when her breathing changes, and responding with care and alignment. It's knowing when to slow down, when to intensify, when to switch focus, when to simply hold her. Attunement creates anticipation, tension, and release in a way that no pre-planned movement can. Chemistry thrives in this dynamic space because it is alive, unpredictable, and co-created. Moreover, emotional intelligence allows a man to navigate vulnerability, his own and hers. When he can express desire without arrogance, when he can be present without dominating, when he can hold space without controlling, he creates an environment where she feels free to surrender. This vulnerability fuels chemistry because it signals authenticity. The woman senses that he is not performing, not calculating, not trying to win her pleasure, but fully present to experience it with her. This authenticity sparks a magnetic pull that technique alone cannot generate. Consider the soul orgasm, the pinnacle of emotional, mental, and physical integration. Technique has little to do with it. Presence, attunement, and emotional intelligence define it entirely. When both partners are fully attuned, fully present, and fully emotionally resonant, energy flows freely. There is a sense of being fully known and fully seen. Pleasure becomes layered with meaning, connection, and reverence. Chemistry in this space is not something you create. It is something you allow by showing up as an emotionally intelligent and attuned partner. Even beyond orgasm, emotional intelligence and attunement cultivate lingering connection. A woman carries memory, energy, and resonance from each intimate encounter. If she felt mirrored, seen, and emotionally connected, that resonance lingers in her nervous system, creating desire that extends beyond the bedroom. Chemistry is sustained because it is rooted in relational awareness, not fleeting sensation. Technique can spark excitement, but emotional intelligence maintains it. Men who develop this capacity notice a profound difference. The woman responds differently, not because the moves have changed, but because the interaction has depth. She relaxes faster, opens more fully, and experiences pleasure on multiple levels simultaneously. Her energy syncs with his, creating a flow that feels almost electric. Emotional intelligence and attunement bridge the gap between physicality and soul, creating intimacy that is irresistible, magnetic, and sustainable. The practical applications are simple but subtle. Listen more than you speak. Observe without judgment. Adjust without instruction. Mirror energy without mimicking. Communicate through touch, gaze, breath, and rhythm. Allow the moment to unfold organically. Stop treating orgasms as goals, and start treating presence and attunement as instruments of connection. Chemistry will follow naturally because it is a reflection of how deeply aligned two people can be. This is why the best lovers are often understated in technique, but extraordinary in awareness. They don't rely on memorized patterns or mechanical stimulation. They cultivate an ongoing sensitivity to the emotional, mental, and physical currents of their partner. They create chemistry because they understand the human experience of pleasure, that it is not separate from emotion, not isolated from connection, and not confined to the body. When emotional intelligence and attunement are fully exercised, every touch, glance, and breath becomes charged with resonance. Every movement becomes a dialogue of desire. Every pause becomes an invitation for deeper connection. In this space, sex is no longer a series of acts. It is an ongoing conversation between two living, breathing beings. Chemistry is no longer artificial. It is inevitable. Men who embrace this truth experience a transformation themselves. They move beyond insecurity and performance anxiety, discovering confidence rooted in presence. They learn patience, empathy, and attentiveness. They experience pleasure not only in their partner's response, but in the mutual energy that flows between them. And because they bring emotional intelligence to the encounter, they unlock levels of intimacy, resonance, and fulfillment that technique alone could never touch. In essence, emotional intelligence and attunement create the fertile ground for all 6 types of female orgasms. They allow her body to respond fully, her mind to relax, and her energy to flow freely. They convert physical stimulation into multidimensional pleasure, amplifying every sensation with emotional, mental, and spiritual depth. And they generate chemistry that is magnetic, sustainable, and transformative. A chemistry that lingers long after the act, shaping desire, intimacy, and connection in every facet of the relationship. Ultimately, chemistry that arises from emotional intelligence and attunement transcends technique because it is rooted in authenticity. It is alive, dynamic, and co-created. It thrives not on performance but on understanding, not on manipulation but on resonance, not on movement but on presence. When a man masters this, he becomes more than a lover. He becomes a conduit for connection, a mirror for pleasure, and a partner in awakening, experiencing intimacy that is as profound as it is unforgettable. When a man truly understands and begins to master the 6 forms of female pleasure, something extraordinary happens. It's not just that intimacy in the bedroom deepens, the relationship itself transforms. Because these 6 forms of pleasure are not merely physical experiences. They are doorways into the emotional, mental, and spiritual layers of connection. Each orgasm is a language, and when a man learns to speak it fluently, he discovers that the conversation he's having is about much more than sensation. It's about trust, authenticity, presence, and mutual understanding. The clitoral orgasm is where the journey often begins. Mastery of this form of pleasure requires awareness of her body, focus, and patience, but it also requires listening to her energy, adjusting to her subtle cues, and allowing her to feel seen and desired. Learns to honor this first level of pleasure. He begins to recognize that the emotional investment is as important as the physical. It sets the tone for the relationship because she starts to feel valued for more than compliance or performance. She feels understood. She feels appreciated. That appreciation doesn't stay in the bedroom. It spills into conversations, decisions, and shared life experiences. She feels safe expressing herself beyond desire, which deepens emotional intimacy. The G-spot orgasm teaches patience, emotional attunement, and timing. It shows a man that connection cannot be rushed. When he learns to follow her rhythm, to create a container of safety and trust, he is learning skills that extend far beyond the sexual experience. Patience becomes a shared practice in the relationship. Awareness of subtle cues in the bedroom translates into sensitivity to her needs outside of it. Noticing when she's stressed, overwhelmed, or craving attention. The discipline required to unlock G-spot pleasure fosters empathy, turning routine arguments or misunderstandings into opportunities for connection rather than conflict. The cervical orgasm, which demands the deepest trust, demonstrates how vulnerability can transform a relationship. A woman cannot allow this level of physical and energetic surrender unless she feels wholly secure, emotionally and psychologically. When a man cultivates the presence and respect required to hold this space, he's practicing skills that are critical in daily life. He's learning patience, emotional regulation, and consistent integrity. He becomes someone she can lean on, someone whose presence stabilizes her. This transforms the relationship from a transactional dynamic into a partnership built on mutual trust. Intimacy becomes a safe zone where vulnerability is celebrated, not feared. Blended orgasms, which arise from synchronizing multiple pleasure centers, are a masterclass in attunement and communication. They require both partners to move in harmony, to be aware of each other's rhythms, emotional cues, and subtle signals. In mastering this, a man learns how to collaborate on a profound level. He learns how to negotiate tension, respect boundaries, and amplify pleasure through partnership rather than control. These skills extend naturally into the relationship, helping resolve conflicts, make joint decisions, and maintain a sense of harmony in daily life. Blended orgasms teach that the best outcomes arise not from dominating or imposing, but from listening, responding, and aligning with each other's energy. Full-body orgasms illuminate the transformational power of presence and energy exchange. They show a man that pleasure is not localized and that intimacy is not contained. When a woman experiences full-body release, her energy flows freely, connecting mind, body, and spirit. The man who facilitates this learns the art of being fully present, the ability to hold energy, and the importance of nonverbal communication. This capacity translates directly into relational growth. He becomes someone who can hold emotional space for her when she is overwhelmed, someone capable of deep listening, and someone attuned to the rhythms of shared life. Full-body pleasure demonstrates that connection is holistic, a fusion of physical, emotional, and energetic alignment. The soul orgasm, rare and transcendent, reveals the profound spiritual dimension of intimacy. This form of pleasure cannot occur without complete trust, unconditional acceptance, and deep emotional resonance. It transforms the relationship because it allows both partners to experience one another fully, without masks, defenses, or expectations. When a man learns to facilitate this experience, he is cultivating not just sexual mastery, but relational mastery, the ability to co-create experiences that are sacred, transformative, and mutually fulfilling. The relationship becomes a space of continuous growth, emotional depth, and spiritual resonance. She experiences him not merely as a lover, but as a partner in the exploration of life itself. Mastering these 6 forms of pleasure requires a shift in perspective. From sex as performance to intimacy as co-creation, a man realizes that he is not just seeking to elicit responses. He is learning to recognize and respond to her internal world. He becomes attuned to her emotional rhythms, her fears, her joys, and her vulnerabilities. This attunement inevitably spills over into everyday life, making him more empathetic, more patient, and more capable of sustaining connection outside the bedroom. He learns that the quality of sexual connection is inseparable from the quality of emotional connection. The cumulative effect is profound. A woman who experiences all 6 forms of pleasure with a partner feels fully seen, fully understood, and fully valued. She experiences trust and safety on levels that extend far beyond physical sensation. Her body, mind, and spirit are aligned with the relationship. In turn, the man learns to hold space, to listen deeply, to respond with care and sensitivity, and to value presence over performance. Both partners experience a transformation that is enduring. The relationship becomes a sanctuary of connection, a source of joy, and a wellspring of mutual growth. Beyond the bedroom, mastery of these forms of pleasure teaches lessons about communication, empathy, and emotional presence that strengthen every aspect of a relationship. Conflicts are handled with care, because the practice of attunement in intimacy becomes a blueprint for navigating challenges together. Trust deepens because the consistency of emotional intelligence in one space reinforces reliability in all spaces. Safety becomes an ongoing experience because both partners know that vulnerability is honored, not punished. Presence becomes a habit, not a choice, creating a bond that cannot be eroded by distance, stress, or time. Mastery also transforms desire. When a woman experiences consistent, holistic pleasure, her attraction deepens, not merely to the man's body or technique, but to his capacity to connect, his presence, and his emotional intelligence. Desire is no longer superficial or fleeting. It becomes a reflection of the strength, depth, and reliability of the relational bond. The relationship itself becomes more magnetic, fulfilling, and sustainable. Ultimately, mastering these 6 forms of pleasure reveals a profound truth. Intimacy is not separate from the relationship. It is the relationship. Every moment of awareness, every attuned touch, every space held with patience, trust, and presence strengthens the foundation on which the partnership rests. Pleasure becomes the medium through which love, trust, and emotional resonance are communicated. The act of connecting in this holistic, conscious way transforms not only sexual experiences, but the entire relational landscape. The man who takes the time to understand, honor, and facilitate these experiences becomes more than a lover. He becomes a partner, a confidant, and a guide in the journey of shared growth. The woman who is met with this level of care and understanding becomes more fully engaged, expressive, and connected. Together, the relationship evolves into a living, breathing entity of trust, passion, and intimacy. The 6 orgasms are not just destinations for pleasure. They are exercises in relational mastery. Each one teaches the man patience, empathy, and presence. Each one opens the woman's body and heart in layers, strengthening trust and deepening connection. When he masters these experiences, he is simultaneously cultivating a relationship that thrives on understanding, resonance, and mutual fulfillment. In essence, the mastery of female pleasure is a map for mastering love itself. It demonstrates that intimacy and relationship are inseparable. When a man learns to meet a woman on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, he discovers that pleasure is both a reflection and a driver of relational growth. He realizes that the bedroom is not separate from life, but a laboratory where the skills of empathy, attunement, and trust are practiced and perfected. This mastery transforms the relationship because it creates a cycle of deep connection. Trust begets vulnerability. Vulnerability begets presence. Presence begets pleasure, and pleasure reinforces trust. The relationship becomes resilient because it is rooted in understanding rather than habit, in attunement rather than routine, in shared resonance rather than performance. Couples who experience this level of intimacy report a profound sense of unity, mutual satisfaction, and lasting desire that extends far beyond physical connection. By approaching intimacy as a holistic practice, one that honors the emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions of pleasure, a man changes the trajectory of the relationship. He moves from being a partner who performs to being a partner who co-creates. He learns that every touch, breath, and glance can carry meaning beyond sensation. He realizes that pleasure is a bridge to emotional depth, not merely a goal. And in doing so, he cultivates a relationship that is transformative, enduring, and deeply satisfying on every level. The 6 forms of female pleasure, clitoral, G-spot, cervical, blended, full body, and soul, are far more than physical phenomena. They are reflections of emotional intelligence, presence, and attunement. When a man learns to honor and facilitate each one, he is learning the language of connection, the architecture of trust, and the practice of love. The relationship itself flourishes because it is grounded in understanding, deepened by intimacy, and sustained by the shared experience of fully realized pleasure. Mastery of these 6 pleasures transforms the couple from participants in a routine sexual cycle to co-creators of a living, evolving bond. Desire becomes dynamic, intimacy becomes multidimensional,